Now, I want to talk about Iraq. While Iraq was getting started, you all were still fresh into the recovery mode here. And so the invasion and occupation of Iraq began in 2003, in March, April of that year. We already had a team there, and during that the closing period of Saddam's period and the opening of the American period, there wasn't that much we could do during the Saddam period, except that we got our experience and we were able to identify connections. But when the Americans came, it was a less violent situation than most people anticipated in the immediate aftermath. Meaning that there was not an uprising of Iraqis and wholesale violence. And so the Americans kind of relaxed, and then within about a week or two, there was an eruption of all kinds of raids and stealing and so forth. Because at that time, the police disappeared, the military disappeared, and the American forces had no idea how to control the situation. It was really, really a difficult situation. So we were faced with the problem of what do we do? And at that time, there were something like 150 international NGOs, non-government organizations, poised to provide assistance in Iraq. And during that period, groups of Iraqis came to us and requested help for defusing ammunition that had been, released or left in the streets and so forth by various groups. Children were playing in it, and it was everywhere. And so they asked us, would we contact the U.S. command and ask them to do something about this? And most of the time, we did not get very much cooperation from them. Sometimes we did. Much of that then was captured by the groups, put away, and eventually became part of the resource for the war that came in 2005 and 2006. We were also contacted by a kind of an explosion of people who were trying to get their lives looked at. Women's groups, labor groups, political groups, and particularly Shia religious groups. And you'll know in Iraq, what has happened in the last 7 years is much like what has happened here, a division of religious groups within the larger Muslim community. It's a terrible thing. It hasn't ever existed this way before in Iraq. And so now you have a division, serious division, with walls, complete with walls. And so that was that. So agent provocateurs were beginning to work in both communities to bring this about. But anyway, that's a long story I won't get into. The Shia came to us and said, would you come with us and help us with particularly our people who have been, who disappeared 10 years ago or 11 years ago when President Bush promised to support us, and we had an uprising. And so there were fields near Karbala and Najif, all throughout the south, where thousands of bodies had been buried. And so they asked us to come, and they said to us, would you just do a little prayer service with us? And so we did that. And we would go to these areas that were, they were 5 acres or 6 acres or so, as many as 10. And you would have these graves, one right after the other. And on top of the grave would be, they were like, the bodies were just thrown there. And on top of the graves you would find a little bit of cloth, maybe a little bit of hair, maybe a shoe. There were quite a few shoes, just enough for a clump of something. So that the families could maybe come and identify what was remaining of these bodies. This is now 11 years after the event. And so we would join them, and we would do a Christian prayer vigil with Muslim support. And it was, I mean, it's a new thing for Christian Peacemaker Teams, but we did. And it was appreciated, and I think it probably kind of, maybe it, I don't know if we did any miracles, so we certainly didn't do any resurrections, but it was yeah, I think it was a good thing to do, and it certainly built relationships.